You probably walked past this shelf and thought it looked fine. Full pantry, full cart, nothing missing. But most of what's sitting in there quietly stops being good in 12 to 18 months, and nobody checks until they need it. Most people restock the wrong things every single year without ever noticing. And one item near the end of this list came out of a sealed jar 3,000 years later and was still safe to eat. You still have time. But the shelf does not stay boring forever. A full pantry and a lasting pantry are not the same thing. Food can sit there looking fine while it quietly loses safety, flavor, or usefulness long before the bag ever looks empty. What actually decides how long something lasts is moisture, fat, and packaging, not how sturdy it looks on the shelf. So before you buy one more bag of something that expires next spring, here's what actually lasts, and it is not always what you'd guess. Number 20. Table salt. Start with the box in the back of your pantry nobody has replaced in years. That's not neglect. Sealed and dry, salt is considered indefinite. No absorber, no rotation needed. But here's the catch. When demand spikes, bulk bags vanish first while the small iodized shaker sits untouched. Chemically identical, just the wrong format. That's frustrating mid-recipe if you're curing meat or canning and suddenly need more than a shaker can give. Salt also quietly becomes infrastructure later on this list. Buy one large bag now, store it dry, and stop thinking about it. But the next item is just as boring until you calculate what it actually costs per pound. Number 19. White granulated sugar. Picture a canning batch or a holiday bake, half finished, and the sugar runs out. Like salt, sugar stores indefinitely without an absorber. The problem isn't the sugar, it's the bag size. Small boxes stay stocked. Bulk bags disappear weeks before casual shoppers even start looking, especially before jam season or holiday baking. Sugar isn't just sweet here, it's a preservative, which is exactly why it belongs on this list. Buy the largest sealed bag you can find and split it into airtight containers. The next item does something salt and sugar can't. It can replace a full jar of medicine cabinet basics. Number 18. Rolled oats. Same food, two completely different lifespans, and the difference is a bag. Oats in a paper canister look shelf-stable because the label says so. Open it and moisture gets in fast. Sealed properly, oats can last 20 to 25 years. Left in a standard container, more like 6 to 12 months. That's the gap between a decade-long reserve and a breakfast staple gone musty exactly when you need it. Buy sealed bulk oats or repackage what you have if the container isn't airtight. Next is the item most people think is interchangeable with a version that quietly expires years earlier. Number 17. White rice, not brown. Most people buy brown rice for health and don't realize they've sabotaged their own storage plan. Brown rice keeps its natural oil layer, and that oil goes rancid. White rice, sealed with an oxygen absorber, can reach 25 to 30 years. Brown rice tops out around 5 to 7 because of that one layer of fat. Same grain, different fate. In warehouse stores, bulk white rice moves fast, while brown rice sits untouched. A quiet sign the serious stockpilers already know the difference. Keep brown rice for eating soon. Buy white rice for the long haul. This oil versus no oil rule shows back up later with cooking oil. The next item isn't a grain at all, and it fails for almost the opposite reason. Number 16. Dried pinto beans or lentils. Beans look permanently dry already, so people assume they can't go bad. But old, poorly sealed beans develop something called hard-to-cook syndrome, simmering for hours and never actually softening. Technically edible, practically useless in a pot. Sealed properly, beans and lentils reach 25 to 30 years, versus 1 or 2 in a standard bag. A bean can outlive the bag it came in 3 or 4 times over, but only if stored right and rotated occasionally. Safety and usability are not the same measurement. The next item is the one ingredient that turns these staples into something plantable, not just edible. Number 15. Hard red wheat berries. Here's a bucket of wheat, stored for 30 years, and still no bread. Wheat berries are dual use, food and seed, holding that 25 to 30-year window right alongside rice and beans. But most households don't own a grain mill. The grain sits there, technically stored, functionally useless without the one small tool that turns it into flour. Whole wheat berries stay easy to find in bulk, while hand grinders and mill attachments are the ones that end up backordered, Pair any wheat purchase with a manual grinder. Some can even be sprouted for fresh greens, which flour alone can't give you. The next item is smaller, cheaper, and you probably already own a bag of it without realizing how differently it can be used. Number 14. Popcorn kernels. A popped kernel found in a dry cave was documented at roughly 1,000 years old. Whole sealed popcorn is one of the more forgiving pantry items in normal conditions because moisture, not age, decides whether it still pops. Too dry, and it just cracks instead of exploding. People treat popcorn as a treat, not a stockpile item, so bulk kernel bags sit ignored while microwave bags fly off the shelf. But morale matters in a stressful stretch, and a cheap bag of kernels is an easy fix. Whole dried kernels also double as backup seed corn. Buy plain bulk kernels, skip the flavored bags, store them sealed. The next item isn't something you eat directly. It's what makes half the food on this list drinkable or usable at all. Number 13. Powdered milk. Picture a recipe that calls for milk, and there's none in the house. Powdered milk closes that gap. But here's the strange part. Sealed properly, it can reach 20 to 25 years, while a standard factory-sealed canister is closer to 2 to 10. That's the widest best-case to worst-case gap on this list. Fresh milk shelves stay stocked while the powdered milk section is the aisle nobody restocks. But one spoonful turns bland oats or flat pancakes into something that tastes like a meal. It pairs directly with the wheat and oats already covered here. None of them reach full usefulness alone. The next item costs almost nothing and does the job of a dozen expensive seasoning packets. Number 12. Bouillon cubes or powdered broth base. A pantry full of calories can still fail at dinner. Rice, beans, and oats are calorie-dense and flavor-neutral, which is exactly why weeks of eating them leads to appetite fatigue, even when the numbers say you've had enough. Bouillon never truly spoils, though it can clump once humidity gets in. It's cheap and forgettable while you're focused on real staples, so in a demand spike, the crowded bulk aisle empties out while the seasoning shelf goes untouched. It's really concentrated salt plus flavor, tying back to the salt item earlier. Buy a few different bases and keep them sealed and dry. The next item isn't eaten at all. It's the small box that keeps half your kitchen usable. Number 11. Baking soda. This is the gasket of the pantry, useless looking until the exact moment everything depends on it. You can have flour, wheat berries, and powdered milk sitting ready and still not bake a single loaf without it. Sealed, baking soda is indefinite, like salt and sugar. But once opened and exposed to air, it slowly loses leavening power, even though the box itself never technically expires. Small boxes are always in stock, but rarely bought in the bulk amount a real reserve requires. It also cleans, deodorizes, and can put out a small kitchen fire. Buy several boxes, reseal tightly, and rotate every couple of years. The next item is the one every preserving recipe depends on, and it comes with a safety rule most people don't know. Number 10. Distilled white vinegar. Most people assume any vinegar in the cabinet works the same for pickling. It doesn't. Safe preservation recipes are calibrated to a specific acidity level, and swapping in a different vinegar without checking that number changes the outcome of the whole batch. Plain distilled white vinegar is shelf-stable indefinitely when sealed, unlike flavored or infused vinegars that develop sediment over time. The plainest, cheapest bottle is also the most dependable one. Specialty vinegars stay stocked because nobody's grabbing them fast, while the plain, verified bottles move first when preserving season hits. Buy plain distilled vinegar with a standard acidity on the label, and don't substitute in a preserving recipe. It also doubles as an all-purpose cleaner. The next item is a fat, not a liquid, and it fails for a completely different reason than anything so far. Number 9. Coconut oil, not just any cooking oil. Same shelf, 2 oils, and one of them is already failing before the label admits it. Most common cooking oils, vegetable, canola, sunflower, are high in polyunsaturated fat and go rancid within about a year, even unopened. Coconut oil and shortening, high in saturated fat, resist that oxidation and can last 2 to 5 years or more properly stored. That's the same oil layer problem from the rice item, showing up in a completely different food. Vegetable oil gets restocked constantly because it turns over fast, while shelf-stable fats sit treated like a specialty item. A pantry heavy in grains and light in fat can leave a household undernourished even while technically full. Stock at least one saturated shelf-stable fat for long-term storage and keep the lighter oils for cooking soon. The next item replaces a fresh food most people assume can't be stored at all. Number 8. Powdered eggs. Most people never even consider eggs could be part of a long-term pantry. Fresh eggs need refrigeration, so the category gets mentally filed as always fresh, never stored. But sealed powdered eggs can last 10 to 15 years, far beyond anything achievable with the fresh version, though they lose potency faster than grains or beans if the seal isn't tight. In a real disruption, fresh egg cases empty out first, while the powdered version sits untouched in a specialty aisle nobody checks. Without it, baking recipes that call for eggs simply stop working. It's also usable on its own for basic scrambled meals. Buy a size your household will rotate through and reseal tightly after opening. The next item is a vegetable most people assume only comes fresh or canned, not shelf-stable for over a decade. Number 7. Dehydrated potato flakes. A vegetable that normally rots in a few weeks, lasting years instead. Fresh potatoes vanish from shelves fast in any real disruption, while dehydrated flakes sit ignored on a lower shelf. But here's the trap. The cheap, small canister sold for a quick weeknight side dish is not the same product as a sealed bulk version meant for storage, and it's the everyday size that disappears first when demand spikes. Potato flakes reconstitute into something close to a real, comforting meal, which matters after weeks of rice and beans start feeling monotonous. They double as a thickener for soups too. Buy the size actually intended for storage, and check the seal. The next item looks like the safest, most obvious choice on this whole list, and it has the shortest real lifespan of anything so far. Number 6. Dried pasta. Here's the twist. Not everything on a never expires list actually lasts the same. Pasta sits on the same aisle as rice, so people assume it behaves the same way. It doesn't. Standard boxed pasta on a normal shelf is good for 1 or 2 years. Sealed properly with an absorber, it can reach 25 to 30, but only if someone repackages it that way first. The same box of noodles can be a 2-year purchase or a 30-year purchase, and the food itself never changes, only the packaging does. Pasta aisles look fully stocked, which hides that most of what's there is only good for the next season. Open a stored box after a couple of years without proper sealing, and you'll find it stale or off. Still, it earns its place because it's fast and easy, needing almost nothing else to become a meal. Repackage it if long-term storage is the goal, or just rotate it yearly. The next 2 items are where this list stops being about grains and starts being about things that used to grow on a tree or a vine. Number 5. Freeze-dried fruits and vegetables. A stored diet heavy in rice, beans, and pasta can leave a household technically fed and quietly short on vitamins for months without anyone realizing why they feel run down. Fresh produce can't be stored long-term at all, and canned produce loses more nutrients over time than freeze-dried does. Freeze-drying removes almost all the moisture from food while keeping color, flavor, and nutrition intact, which is why sealed freeze-dried products commonly reach 25 to 30 years. It's the only method that keeps both calories and vitamins that long. Canned produce sections stay full because they're cheap and familiar, while freeze-dried has-on-zero cans go on backorder first in a real disruption. It also works as a morale item, giving stored meals variety that actually tastes like a treat. Add it specifically to close the gap the grain and bean base leaves open. The next item isn't eaten in the traditional sense, but it's been used for generations as both a sweetener and a medicine cabinet backup. Number 4. Pure maple syrup. This one is basically immortal, right up until you break the seal. Like honey, maple syrup resists spoilage because of its sugar concentration. Unopened and sealed in a cool, dark space, it can last indefinitely. But once opened, it needs refrigeration, or mold can grow on the surface within weeks, a very different outcome from honey, which stays shelf-stable even after opening. Most people buy it seasonally for pancakes and never think of it as a stockpile item, so only small bottles get stocked, while the larger storage-sized containers are the first to sell out once people pay attention. It also has minor traditional use, soothing a sore throat. Keep one bottle sealed and untouched, and refrigerate promptly the moment any bottle is opened. The next item isn't food in the usual sense either, but it may be the most useful barter and backup item on this entire list. Number 3. Distilled spirits. Most people never think of liquor as a supply. It's a purchase for enjoyment, not preparedness. But distilled spirits, at typical proof, don't support bacterial growth, giving them an effectively indefinite, unopened shelf life, unlike beer or wine, which do change over time. It's the one item on this list that was never meant to expire and never needed a trick to get there. No sealing, no oxygen removal, just the alcohol itself. Because it's rarely discussed in preparedness circles, most households have none set aside when it would actually help, as a cleaning aid, a stress reliever in moderation, or a trade item. Keep one bottle set aside for those non-drinking uses. The next item is the most expensive food on this entire list, and also one of the most overlooked, because most people never think to buy protein in this form. Number 2. Freeze-dried meat. The most expensive item on this list lasts exactly as long as the cheapest one. Most people assume protein storage just means beans and canned meat, never realizing freeze-dried meat exists in bulk sealed cans reaching 25 to 30 years, matching rice and beans despite being a completely different category of food. Here's the gap. Dried beans can't close. They provide protein, but not the complete amino acids or fat real meat provides. A pantry can look protein sufficient on paper and still leave a household nutritionally thin. Sticker shock keeps most households from ever adding it, even though the actual cost per year of storage is often lower than assumed. In a demand spike, the bean and rice sections get crowded fast, while the smaller freeze-dried meat section, often online only, is the one thing nobody checks until real protein and fat are what's missing from a plate. Add even a small amount to round out what beans alone can't cover. And that brings us to the one food on this entire list that has already proven for thousands of years that it never actually goes bad at all. Number 1. Honey, a food that has already outlasted the civilization that sealed it. This is not a modern storage trick. No mylar, no oxygen absorber, nothing engineered. Sealed vessels of honey recovered from ancient tombs, some roughly 3,000 years old, with even older examples reported from Georgia, were documented as still edible when opened. Low moisture, natural acidity, and trace hydrogen peroxide create conditions bacteria simply cannot survive in. There is exactly one way this forever food can fail. Leave it open in a humid kitchen, and it can absorb moisture and ferment. Otherwise, it just doesn't quit. Most people buy small bottles for occasional use and never think of it as storage, which is why larger containers meant for real stockpiling are far less common, and usually the first size to disappear once people start taking this seriously. One item quietly covers 3 separate household roles that would otherwise take 3 purchases: sweetener, preservative, and a backup for a sore throat or minor wound. Honey doesn't need a modern trick to last. It's the standard every other item on this list has been trying to imitate. Keep at least one large, sealed container set aside and completely untouched, in addition to whatever bottle you're already using. So here's what all 20 of these boring, easy-to-miss items actually have in common. Calories are not enough without fat. Staples are not enough without flavor. Baking basics are not enough without the one small ingredient that makes them rise. And even a forever pantry still needs the one food that never needed help lasting in the first place. On your next few shopping trips, don't reach for something dramatic. Add one item from the calorie group, one from the protein group, and one small piece of household infrastructure: baking soda, vinegar, or a manual grinder. Check the format and the packaging before you check the price. A shelf doesn't have to be empty for a shortage to already be underway. The useful, long-lasting version of a food disappears first, quietly, while the shelf still looks normal. The best time to buy any of these 20 items is while they're still boring, still cheap, and still easy to overlook. So which one of these has already gotten harder to find at your store? Or which one didn't you even realize you needed until right now?